Jake Alicea writes, "Hey guys, love the show. I heard a question and it's interesting. What is more important in a movie, storytelling or visual effects? What are your thoughts?"
You know, the answer is both obvious and yet not so obvious. Because, look, obviously story is more important than visual effects. Obviously. But here's why it's actually not so obvious sometimes. Let's take a film that we all loved at this table, Pacific Rim. Let's take it. If we really just broke down and want to talk about the story and the storytelling of the movie, not one of my top 10 favorite movies of the year. But the visual effects came in that served that story so well, and they were so grand, and the sequences were so awesome, it made such a great thrill ride that it ends up being in one of my top 10 favorite films of the year. But at the same time, if the story was terrible, I mean, there's some really cool mythology in Pacific Rim and what they set up in that whole world and universe they made that made it pretty compelling, that you can then get great visual effects and it really bolsters it up and makes it fun and wonderful. But that's a rare exception. Most of the time what you have is some of the best visual effects at the time, some of the best visual effects in the history of motion pictures, The Phantom Menace, and it's an awful movie because it was terrible storytelling. And so no matter how great the visual effects were, and they were the best the world had ever seen at the time, it was still a terrible movie. At the same time, you get a movie like Serenity, which not exactly cutting-edge visual effects in Serenity. They were, at best, okay visual effects, at best. But the movie itself is such a brilliantly told story with great and just compelling and in-depth characters, fantastic dialogue, great pacing, wonderful movement, that it doesn't matter that it wasn't world-class visual effects. It was a great movie and we loved watching it. So, yeah, I would say obviously, and sometimes not so obviously, storytelling is by far and away more important than visual effects. Aaron?
You know what's interesting is the more I thought about this question, the more I wasn't sure how I felt about it, because I would have always said story is more important than FX. However, this year has really changed my mind because there have been so many movies I've enjoyed where I didn't really like the story, or I found holes in plot lines that kind of bothered me. But to be honest, I had so much fun watching them, like Pacific Rim or Gravity, that it almost didn't matter to me at all. So I think it really depends on the movie, and I think they go hand in hand, to be honest. I liked my story and my nice little effects at the same time. So it's really hard to say which one's more important to me, but I would have always said story.
Dennis?
For me, it's easy. It's storytelling. Storytelling. That's what the medium of movies is about.
Right.
It's why we watch movies versus if you decide to read a book, because there's so many storytelling elements built into movies. You know, you have acting, the script, you have visual effects as part of storytelling as well.
When it's used right.
Yeah, and then you have, you know, all kinds of stuff. And so, like, you mentioned Phantom Menace and the prequels. That's a perfect example because the actual story is good. The story, not the storytelling.
Itself, yeah.
The visual effects were great for the time, but the storytelling, which is the primary job of the director, was not so good.
No.
He was supposed to bring out the emotion in the actors. He was supposed to, you know, construct the story in a way that we would have been like, oh my God, that's so amazing. And this is another example. This picture behind us. This is a picture of Jonah Hex, which
I was wondering what that was.
Which is a terrible movie. It doesn't matter how good the visual effects were in that movie, it still would have been bad. But if you had, you know, gotten some good storytelling going, because the story of Jonah Hex is actually kind of interesting, at least to me it is. And so if you had gotten someone in there to like take that and make it, I don't know, at least passable to me, like I think that would have been a much better movie.
You know, and I think that the answer to this question is going to vary from person to person because once again, it's as subjective as film itself. It depends on what has you along for the fun ride, and it depends on the film because Pacific Rim is built and constructed as a film to highlight giant monsters fighting giant robots. So that's what it was constructed for. Gravity is constructed to have this sense of what the hell do you do now, which is what you're screaming because the visual effects are done so well. It's really built around visual effects in many ways for that. So it depends on the movie, depends on the individual audience member, but I still believe at the end of the day, it will come down to storytelling. I think most of us will agree storytelling over visual effects, but as in everything, there are exceptions.
If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to AMC Movie News on YouTube.
It's free and a great way to stay updated with all the latest movie news and check out our daily show, AMC Movie Talk. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter to stay in the loop for our special prizes, giveaways, and contests.